Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound. It is Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. Vic Morren and Neil Smith. And we will be joined shortly by the new Vice President and General Manager of the Los Angeles Kings, Ken Holland. But first, how was your extended weekend?
Oh, it was great. It was great. Although down south here, it is not as hot as you would think it would be at this time of year. In fact, the high today is only 60 degrees.
Well, up north here, it's already 70 degrees. And maybe you're getting punished because, as we'd mentioned on a show rather recently, you have this habit of spoiling goals because you're seeing them about 20 seconds before I am, and you tip me off on all 7 goals in the Dallas-Edmonton game on Sunday. What do you have to say for yourself?
Well, I just thought you'd like to know when it happens instead of having to wait. I don't like knowing things and you not knowing them. So I'm just trying to educate you as to what's going on.
Yeah, I don't like it. But understand here that there's a little bit of karma coming your way here because little birdie told me that you get frustrated when you don't win playing Wordle. What's that about?
My wife and I play Wordle against each other. And of course I get frustrated. I want to win. But she gave me a word, knack, the other day, K-N-A-C-K. And I put my word in and I got just the A. And then I used this little thing that's in there that if you've won enough, you get these free letters that come up. So on the second try, I got the word knack and she went ballistic. How could you possibly do that? How did you do that?
Yeah, but I've heard that you get frustrated when you don't win.
I do get flustered. She calls me a baby.
I'm going to kind of pile on here because I play every morning and I got a message from my brother Alan this morning, and we've been playing this since its inception. For the first time, he got Wordle on the first guess. Just this morning. So
I did the New York Times Wordle for a long time. I don't do it anymore. We do it on an app on the, it's a Wordle game on an app.
Yeah.
But I did get the New York Times Wordle on the first guess because my word that I was starting with was slate, S-L-A-T-E.
Yeah.
And I put it in, and that was the word of the day. So I got it on the first guess once myself.
Well, congratulations on that. You didn't play today yet, did you?
No, I don't play. I haven't played the New York Times Wordle for a long time.
Yeah. Well, get into it today.
Okay.
Soon as we're done recording it.
Yes, I will. Well, I might do it while we're recording because you do all the talking.
You're open to do that. But first, we have to hit 3 things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Item number 1, not so fast. The Carolina Hurricanes stay alive in their Eastern Conference Final with the Florida Panthers. They break a 15-game conference final losing streak with a 3-0 shutout down in Sunrise.
Amazing. I mean, they did play well, and Florida was missing a couple of guys, but so was Carolina. So hope springs eternal for the Hurricanes now.
Nico Mikkola, Sam Reinhart, AJ Greer, all out. But as you just said, I think that we have seen Carolina's game come up and sustain longer into each game of this series. And I think that's something that they needed to have happen. And of course, the lone goal of the game before the 2 empty netters at the end, Logan Stankoven continues to play terrific. And how about that little chop backhand pass in the neutral zone by Alexander Nikishin to set up Stankoven for that goal.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with Stankoven. I mean, I saw him play on Dallas, and I watched him, and he was a little guy. He didn't get a lot of opportunity, I don't think, in Dallas, and he's got a ton of opportunity in Carolina, and he's very impressive. Very, very impressive. He's a bull in a china shop, and he gets involved in every game.
And I do want to go back to Nikishin because strong on both sides of the puck last night. I thought he was a standout along with Jacob Slavin. And collectively, the way Carolina defended, very impressive.
Yeah, and I think Nikishin's going to be a real good find for the Carolina Hurricanes. He's only played a couple of games now. Yeah. He's looked good to me, and Carolina did defend very, very well in this game. Obviously, they got a shutout, so they did something right against Florida. Now they'll head to Carolina for Game 5. I don't think Carolina can win 3 straight games from the Panthers. That would be a hard thing to fathom, but you know what? They'll give it an effort.
It was 4 before. It's 3 now. 20-save shutout for Freddie Anderson, who did not face a lot of traffic, didn't face a lot of work, made the stops when he needed to. Number 2, let's address the Panthers side now. I thought in an attempt to sweep this, and again, we've already addressed the fact that they had 3 guys out of the lineup last night. I thought they were flat. And it was almost as if they weren't prepared to close this series out any more than they were in Game 4 in the Stanley Cup Final in Edmonton last year when they lost 8-1.
You know, I hate to say this, but Paul Maurice is so smart of a coach. I wouldn't put it past him that he didn't want to sweep Carolina, that he wanted to keep playing. That may not be true.
You really believe that?
No, I don't. But I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. I don't put it past him that he sat the guys that could have played last night. I have no doubt that AJ Greer or Mikkola, not Reinhart, but one of those guys could have played if it was Game 7, but he let them not play or had them not play so that they didn't get banged up anymore. Who knows? I mean, he's a very smart guy, as we know. I'm sure you're right. He would have liked to finish them off, but maybe when you sit players out like that, the rest of the team lets their foot off the gas a little bit.
On Monday's Cup date, we had spoken about, and me in particular, saying I expected them to go for the kill shot early. They did get one opportunity, and I believe it was Verhaeghe coming down the left side, who had a great shot early in the first period. Looked like it glanced off Anderson's glove and went wide of the net. But for the most part, I didn't love their game. And we had spoken about, in order for Carolina to get back in this series, Carolina would need to raise their game, which they have. And I would say significantly over the course of the series. And also that needed to be coupled with Florida's game coming down a notch. And I thought it came down a notch in Game 3. I thought it came down a couple of more notches in Game 4.
I totally agree with you. And I think that that's what needed to happen to get Carolina back into the series. Not only did their play have to go up, but the Panthers' play had to go down, and that's what's happened. You've described it well, and I think you're going to see, as we've talked about throughout the playoffs, that the losing team, this case the Panthers, they'll make adjustments now. They'll go home, they'll make adjustments, they'll get their game back in order. Carolina will have to take it up another notch to be able to win another game against the Panthers.
Game 5, back in Raleigh, Wednesday, 8 o'clock Eastern on TNT. Number 3, the disappearing act needs to end for the Dallas Stars forwards. They are now trailing 2-1 against Edmonton, and that game will be played Tuesday on ESPN, 8 o'clock Eastern. Let me go down this list of their 8 20-goal scorers, and I don't know if I have remembered a time where I have seen so many high-quality offensive players have their wells dry up simultaneously. Jason Robertson, 9 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, and that lone goal was the only goal in game number 3, which happened to hit his stick because it was a shot that was originally taken by Leon Bishop. Mason Marchment, 13 games played, 1 goal, -3. Wyatt Johnston, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points, a minus 17. No points in his last 6 games, no points in 8 of his last 9. Evgeny Dodonov, 16 games played, 1 goal, no points in his last 6 games. Mikael Granlund, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points in his last 5 games since his hat trick against Winnipeg in Game 4. Matt Duchene, 16 games in the playoffs, 1 goal, 5 assists, minus 13. Rupe Hintz, even though he didn't play in Game 3, 1 goal in his last 9. And Mikko Rantanen, I think we can stop the talk about Conn Smythe Trophy for now. 2 assists in his last 6 games.
Say no more.
Yeah, I mean, they accounted for 180 of the 277 goals scored by the Stars during the course of the season. That's 65%. You cannot have everybody drying up at the same time.
No, you can't. And especially playing against Edmonton with the firepower that they've got. And let me tell you something, their wells are not nearly dry. Connor McDavid has found his goal scoring touch again, and that is going to mean some ugly things for the opposition, whether it be Dallas or Florida or, dare I say, Carolina. But they better get going and get going fast. Rantanen better find that game that he had against Winnipeg, because if not, Edmonton's going to be blowing past Dallas.
And there you have 3 things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc.
Well, it is time to welcome in my old friend, and I never thought in my wildest dreams I would be saying this. His name is Ken Holland, the Vice President and General Manager of the Los Angeles Kings. How the heck did this happen?
I'm a little surprised myself, to tell you the honest truth. But, you know, at the end of last year, when I was done with, we parted ways with the Edmonton Oilers. Gary Bettman and Colin Campbell were nice enough to give me a job with the hockey operations department. I enjoyed my year. I know my wife enjoyed the year. And as it got into about February and March, started to get the itch, and the phone rang from Luke. You know, a lot. You know, I'm a Midwestern guy. We've either lived in our whole life in either Vernon, BC, Medicine Hat, Alberta, when I was scouting with you from 85 to 94, Detroit or Edmonton. So when this came along, being out west, Luke Robitaille, I've got a relationship with him. He played for the Red Wings in 2002. Wonderful ownership here with Mr. and Miss Sandshoots. They have a good hockey team. It all kind of made sense to me to come back here and see if I can make a little bit of a difference.
Well, Ken, last time we had you on, you were actually the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers at that time. And you were talking about living in Vernon in between being a goaltender for Adirondack and before you had gotten a call from me and Jimmy to become a scout with Detroit. And you enlightened us into what your occupation, you know, could possibly have been, right, Vic?
It's true. And so, you know, there's kind of the joke here that you really weren't hired for VP and GM of the Kings, but instead you were hired more to go to your roots. And so we just wanted to make sure that, you know, we're interviewing for the correct position here. So
maybe you're vice president GM of Healthy Home Center in Irvine.
It does go back. It does go back to my roots. There's no. I think my mother would be very pleased with that move. But I fall in love with being involved in hockey. So fortunate that it's hockey and not a vacuum business somewhere, cleaning business.
Just anybody that didn't hear that podcast, Ken almost became a
Electrolux. My mother suggested that I take a job as an Electrolux vacuum cleaner salesman in 1985, when my playing days were over, when there was not a big demand for 5'8" goaltenders, 29-year-old goaltenders. So fortunately, Neil Smith, and Jim Devellano reached out to me about a week later and offered me a job as a Western Canada scout. And here we are.
Well, let's get to the real business of hockey. You know, your former team, the Oilers, I'm sure you've got your eyes on them. Everybody does right now. And they're 2 wins away, from going to the final again. What do you think's different about this team than the team you had last year?
I think, first off, the experience of being through the playoff run last year. We had gone to the Final Four in 2023. And then last year, or 2022, and then 2024, they were down 3-2 against Vancouver, came back, won. You're down 2-1 to Dallas. Last year, you got to win Game 4, won the series. You're down 3-0 to Florida and got it to Game 7. So I think those experiences are very, very valuable and part of the process to eventually win the Cup. Probably some good moves by Stan Bowman with the addition of Jake Wallman and Klingberg on the back end have helped the team have real better depth on the back end. I think they're probably hoping to get Ekholm back here at some point in time, but I think for the most, a lot of the players are the same team that we had last year, with Wallman and a couple other players that haven't had the impact but they're on the team. But it's a good hockey team. Obviously, it's been through the battle tested, and all those experiences have paid dividends this year. Probably when they were down 2-0 to LA, and down in the third period in Game 3, and down the third period in Game 4, and found a way to win both games. But you just being in those situations over and over and over again, you get more and more comfortable.
Ken, you played goal. We mentioned that earlier, and you've got a different philosophy on goaltenders, but we won't get into that. I just want to ask you, because this is really confusing to me, Stuart Skinner, at times looks like he'll be the Achilles heel of the Edmonton Oilers, and Kelvin Pickard is his backup, and he looks like he couldn't carry the mail for the Edmonton Oilers. Now you get into this year, and particularly in this round, and Skinner looks great, and Pickard looked great until he got hurt. So which is the real guy? Is it Skinner, the one that's the Achilles heel, or Skinner, the one that's it's prime beef?
What ends up happening, and we had a little bit in Detroit in those days. When you've got high octane, lots of people think you win because of your offense and you lose because of your defense or your goaltender. And it's not true. The reality is, it takes everybody to win. And I think having Connor and Leon, when the feeling is you win because you're high octane and you lose, there's no doubt that it's at times with Stu, his play can go up and down. Last year he got pulled out for a couple of games in the Vancouver series. Pick went in and did a great job, won a game, had another game, and in those 3-4 games it was an opportunity for the goaltender coach and Stu to kind of get things settled down, and he played great from then on all the way through the rest of the playoffs. And this year, obviously, Stu had a couple of rough outings the first couple of games against LA. Wonderful job by Pick, and now Stu's back in. Stu's 26 years old. He's just really coming into the age when you're mature as a goaltender. There's so much pressure to deal with, and I look at other goalies around the league. Top goalies, and they go in stretches. Not everybody plays at a high level all the time. You really probably need 2 goalies. So, I'm a big Stu Skinner fan. We did a lot of winning with him when I was there, and they did a lot of winning with him this year. He wins 35, 40 games every year, 30 to 40 games every year. Certainly, there's some nights the offense does it, but there are nights when your defense and your goaltender have got to be the difference, and he is. So I think because he has those moments, probably, as we're talking, to reflect back to probably Chris Osgood in his days in Detroit. Ozzy won 403 National Hockey League games and won a couple of Stanley Cups, and there were moments when he hit some rough patches. It happens to most guys, other than the elite guys. But basically, I think Stu's got a lot of battle, a lot of compete, a lot of determination. When you play goal in Canada on a team that's got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and the expectations, you're dealing with a lot of pressure on a day-to-day basis. And when you got those moments in time when you're off your game, it would be easy to lose your confidence. But to Stu's credit, he digs in, goes to work, and always seems to bounce back.
So part of your task in your new role now is to upend your former team, and the Kings have gone down 4 consecutive springs to the Oilers in the opening round of the playoffs. So as you take this club over, what's your first order of business? You've got $21.7 million in cap space, roughly. You do have 5 unrestricted free agents on the current roster. Where do you look to begin?
Well, I think we've got, obviously, we've got a big decision on Gavrikov on defense. You got to be good on the back end. And with when Drew Doughty was out for the first 60 games, they did a great job in eating up those minutes because, Drew plays 21, 22, 23, 24 minutes a night, and they had a real good year. So I've, got to figure out Gavrikov, and does he want to come back? What's it going to take? And if not, we got to kind of have to be ready through our pro scouting meetings to make some decisions on the back end. As you mentioned, Dave Rittich in goal is an unrestricted free agent. Got to make a decision on David, whether he's the guy or we want to go another direction. Kuzmenko obviously is an unrestricted free agent. Was a real nice pickup from the trade deadline on. Found a home here for the last 20 games. Played on the power play and really helped the power play. So those are probably the most important decisions between now and the beginning of July. In the meantime, talk to the coach. Met with him a couple of times already, going to meet again just to continue to go over the roster, what he thinks about the team. We have pro scouting meetings coming up. I'm looking forward to meeting with, spending time with the pro scouts, Nelson Emerson, Glenn Murray, get their thoughts, which has already been going on, and ultimately determine a plan from critical time in the off season is from about June 23rd, 24th, 25th, the week of the draft until July 10th. That 3 weeks there is when you really rebuild or make decisions on your team for the upcoming season. Obviously, the unrestricteds we've talked about. I'm working the phones, talking to general managers to see what might be they might be thinking about their teams. Is there a trade possibility? And then get ready to make some decisions in that 3-week window.
I wanted to also ask you, because you obviously go back decades in this, as does Neil. So this question really is for both of you, that as the decades have gone on, and let's use a 30-year window, how has constructing a team changed? And obviously there's the salary cap that is here now that wasn't in place when both of you started. But what are the biggest differences in terms of building a team that you see? Or is it fundamentally the same?
I think it's similar. I guess I would say to you first, Vic, for me personally, spending time with Neil from 1985 to 1994, and Jim DeVolano, who was the architect of the Islanders, scouting and understanding the importance of talent, and then from there, the development of that talent, and then going to work in 94 to 97 with Scotty Bowman and Jim DeVolano, and being in the office every day as the assistant general manager, was an opportunity. And I was general manager of the Adirondack Red Wings. So it was my opportunity to build teams and understanding the importance of, I call it the engine, the group of players that drives your team. And then all the supporting, the importance of chemistry, the importance of checkers, the importance of, the ingredients that you think you need to win. I don't know that, when I look at the teams that win, they got an engine that drives their team. They know how to check. And when Scotty Bowman came to Detroit in 1994, I'd say his message was defense, defense, defense. We were playing high octane, high risk, high hockey, and you'd win 5-3, and come in the regular season in the playoffs, you'd give up 3, but you'd only score 2, and you'd be out. So the importance of your team understanding how to check, how to defend, how to protect the lead, and those are the veterans that you try to bring in, because those players understand it. That's what, coming back to the experience we talked about for the Edmonton Oilers, all those experiences. That's what happened in Detroit, and I think other teams have gone through the same thing. So I think it's similar. Certainly the players are a little bit different. I think 20 years ago they expected to spend time in the American League. They don't expect to spend much time in the American League now as they once did. The cap since 2005, but you still got to make the same decisions within the cap. So I think it's a group of players. I call it the engine. It's a group of 4 to 8 players that drive your team, set the tone. And if you don't have the engine, you got to build the engine. You got to draft, you got to develop. You probably got to be bad for a while, and you got to build the engine. And once you get the engine, then it's going to work to build all the different pieces and parts that are necessary. Get some scoring, get some checking, get some size, get some shot blockers, get a guy that can run the power play. Maybe he's in that 4 to 8 group, and goaltending, obviously. So I think it's similar in my mind. Neil could kind of jump in from his days building the New York Rangers.
Yeah, but I think, Ken, just to follow, everything you said I totally agree with and have thought the same way. But the one place where I wonder if it's changed, because I haven't been in the chair in this era. I've always told people that the 2 most important decisions you make as a GM are, number 1, who's the coach? That's the most important decision. And the second most important decision is who's the goalie. And then I would go on from there. Now, is that still the case, or is it changed a little bit?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I always say that the most important decision a general manager has to make is the coach. And I think in goaltending, I kind of look at goaltending. I'm a bit of an NFL fan. But there's probably 8 to 10 elite quarterbacks that are a cut above everybody else. I think it's similar in hockey. There's probably a group of 8 to 10 goalies that are a cut above everybody else, and we all kind of have a similar name. And then there's a lot of guys, they're NHL goalies or they're NFL quarterbacks, and they probably need more pieces. So part of that is, in Detroit, it was, I guess, building the defensemen. Obviously, Nick Lidstrom and Chris Chelios and Brian Rafalski and Nicholas Kronwall, and certainly I look at the impact that when we did the deal for Matthias Ekholm at the trade deadline 3 years ago, his impact on the Edmonton Oilers. So, trying to build a defense, but. So I'm with you on the goaltender, but I think it's the goaltender and then the group of defensemen, and your team you can't be turning pucks over and playing high event hockey. It's tough to go on long playoff runs when you're constantly giving the other team opportunities, when you're playing the top half of the league in the first round, and then the top quarter of the league in the second round, and then the top 4 teams. Like you've got to play lower event hockey, and I think some of that comes with the experience, the coach, the impact of the coach. But you certainly have to have good goal. You certainly have to have good goaltending. I don't know if you have to have an elite guy, but you got to have good goaltending. Your team's got to know how to check.
Ken, before Rob Blake decided to resign from the Kings, and him and Luke made that decision, and you were afar then, probably never thinking that there would be an opportunity in LA. But tell me, what were your thoughts on Darcy Kuemper? Because he was with Washington. It didn't go well. It obviously went very well in Colorado. And I think from afar, from here, it's gone very well for him with the Kings. And I just wondered, now that you haven't had him you haven't been the GM for him as a player yet, did you have thoughts on him from afar when you were watching the Kings?
Yeah, and he also played, I think, well in Arizona prior to Colorado. So he's been a guy that, Darcy's 35 years of age now. So I think goalies can play better older than they don't have to, skate up, and you have to understand the position, and the gray hairs you get are a value in net. Where might up front when you got a skater and defense, you start speed is an effect. So he's at a great age. He's been a good goalie in the National Hockey League for many years. Things didn't work out in Washington. Obviously, we played them when they won the Cup in 2022. We played them in the third round. I think he got hurt a couple of games into the series, but played great for LA last year. And certainly his play And the team, they were what, top 3 or 4 in the league in goals against, were major factors as to why they had 105 points and really liked their chances going into this series against Edmonton, and we're up 2-0 in that series. So certainly I feel good having Darcy Kuemper, and now we've got to decide if we want to come back with the tandem of Darcy and David Rittich or make a change. And again, I'm going through that with all the people and talking to the goalie. Bill Ranford's the head of the goalie department, talking to the coach. I'm trying to get my arms on around a lot of things here, and knowing that in the next couple of weeks I got to start to make some decisions.
They say this is a copycat league, and of course everybody would want to copy what Bill Zito and Paul Maurice have done in Florida, but the truth is that the 4 teams that are remaining, Panthers, Hurricanes, Stars, and Oilers, all have different DNA, and very often it's not what you can see that's right in front of you, but what you can see beyond that. In a perfect world, how do you want to build this team? We did touch on a few minutes ago about what your salary cap looks like and your impending UFAs are. But aside from goaltending, defense, what's the perfect mold for Ken Holland's Kings for 25-26?
Well, it's all the catchwords. I think, size, speed, skill are, compete, goaltending, and a coach behind the bench that knows how to get the most out of his players. But when we played Vegas in the round of 8, the year they won the Stanley Cup, I think Vegas, we'd acquired Bukestad at the deadline. A year before we acquired Ekholm, and we had Vinny Desharnais. But I think Vegas and Edmonton were the 2 biggest teams of the final 8. So Vegas, I think size is of importance, but but overall, but there's lots of room for undersized players. Got a good goaltending, and you want to know how to, you got to have defensemen that know how to defend, that know how to block shots. Got to be good on special teams. I think, you got to find those players. That's and you got to build it. You got to build it. Again, like you said, I think Rob Blake has done a great job. The signing of Edmondson was a great job. The trade to bring in Darcy Kuemper, the signing of Warren Fogle on the third line with Deneau and Moore, and Fogue's at 20 goals, 25 assists. I think he was plus 35. So he was a great addition. The growth of Byfield, the growth of LaFerriere, the growth of Brandt Clark. So when I come in here, it's the continued growth of the young players. Rob Blake's made a deal to bring in a goalie. I got to just figure out, but it's a 2-goalie league. It's not a 1-goalie league. It's not where Glenn Hall plays 80 out of 80 games and everybody just sort of sits there and watches one guy. You need 2 goalies. Even if one plays 50, the other's going to play 30. So it's a 2-goalie league. And then obviously Drew Doughty missed about 60 games last year. Had a real tough ankle break. Need him to have a real good off season and come back. Drew's 35, but he, I had brought in. One year I traded for a 37-year-old defenseman in Detroit by the name of Chris Chelios. He played 9 years for me until he was 46 years old. So,
and he'd still be playing if he had his way.
So the Stars, they can beat Father Time, and maybe they're not superstars, but they're still really good players. So Drew Doughty is still a really good player. So, part of being good is internal. It's the growth of some of your young players. It's some people take, and then it's some of the moves that the management has to make to try to kind of have all the pieces fit together.
Ken, somebody threw a theory at me yesterday, and I want to throw it at you just because I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. It's a copycat league. I mean, everybody's looking to win the cup. Everybody looks at who does win the cup and says, okay, well, that's what we've got to be like now. Do you think because of the fact that Florida Panthers, and I'm not saying they're going to win it this year, but they won it last year, because they're such a physical team that there'll be that the skill side, the skill players, you might get a discount on them at free agent time because not as many people will be shopping for that. They'll be shopping for physicality because they think that is what's going to win over, say, the skill. So, for example, Marner, who is an all-skill player, might they might not get what we thought he would get. What are your thoughts on that? Is there anything
I
to
want to
that?
talk about it because I don't want to talk about any specific players, but
No, not specific player. I'm sorry.
Two things as you're saying that. I disagree for two reasons. One, you need skill to make the playoffs. And so, what really happens is the game is a little bit different in the Stanley Cup playoffs than the regular season. And it's a credit to the players. They dig deeper. They if they played that way for 82 games like they play in the playoffs, you might only have a half a team left by the end of the season. I mean, I watched that Four Nations. That was a 10-day tournament. They were dropping real good players. There must have been 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players in that tournament hurt. So you can't play that way over 82 games. So you need a team over 82 games that can get you into the playoffs. It's got to be leaned towards skill, in my opinion, to get in. And then secondly, I would say with the cap going up, from this year from 88 to 95, and then it's going from 95 to 104-ish, and then it's going to 113. Yeah. Teams are going to want skill because only half the teams make the playoffs, half miss. It's hard to get in. People take getting into the playoffs for granted, but it's hard to make the playoffs. So I still think that people are going to want skill. Cap is going in leaps and bounds here over the next 3 years, and you need skill to get into, and then obviously that's where you build. Then part of your team is sort of built for the playoffs. Every year we see some players that are not as important to their team during the regular season, and they're important to their team come playoff time. Fourth lines, you see the importance of fourth lines because again, when you get to the playoffs, over 82 games you're playing there's some teams that are they're not quite as good, but then when you get to the top 16, they're all almost 100-point teams. They're real well built. They're good hockey teams. And then if you win a round, you're into the round of 8. So, you need depth. You got to roll 4 lines. You're going to have injuries. You need people to come in when people go down. I still think it's going to be similar mindset heading into, just the players are going to, because the cap's going up, they're going to make a little bit more.
So before we let you go, I got to ask you what your thoughts are on these two series, Dallas and Edmonton, and then, of course, Carolina and Florida. Carolina having won the last game. And have you got any thoughts you could share with us about those two series?
Actually, last night's game 4 was probably more with the Carolina winning, basically 1-0. It's 2 empty net goals, but more of what I expected. Probably was a little surprised with the way things went. Although game 3 was 1-1 going into the third period, and it's a funny third period. But so that series a little surprised me. All 4 teams they've been good for a while. Like Carolina's been good, Dallas has been good, Edmonton's been good, Florida has been to the finals twice in a row. So they're 4, well-built teams. I think Dallas has been 3 of the past 4 Final Fours. Yeah. Carolina, every year is real good. Great coach in Rod Brindamore. So, these are 4 of the elite teams in the National Hockey League. Surprised at times when you see a 6-1 score. There was a 6-1 score there in the Edmonton game, but I think over 7 games, 6 games or 5 games, more nights than not, it's going to be really, really close. And they're 4 of the elite organizations and teams in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, there's certainly no Cinderellas in this Final Four. Like there is some years, there's a Cinderella goes into that. I don't know if you heard Paul Maurice after the game last night, but he had a great quote. Somebody said, "What did you think of Bobrovsky for you tonight?" And he said, "I didn't like him on the second and third goal. I thought his gap was way too big."
Yeah, I heard.
Kenny, thanks for you just got to LA and you're good enough to come on this with us, and we really appreciate it. And hope once you get into the season, maybe we can have you come back and talk to us again about the Kings.
Vic, that's one of my mentors. I got a couple of mentors, Jim Devellano and Neil Smith, and I'm forever grateful for. Remember 1985, the the phone rang, and it was Neil Smith on the other end of the line. And actually, the coach had recommended Neil was the general manager of the Adirondack Red Wings, and the head coach. My mind's gone blank here, but Bill Dineen recommended to Neil that they reach out to me and talk to me about a scouting. Bill had lived across the street in the same condo complex, and on road games I'd drive with Bill to the rink so that my wife could have a vehicle and go by. We had 2 little kids at that time, 3 and 1, and then Neil reached out to me, and Neil said that Bill Dineen had recommended to Neil hire me as a Western scout, and Neil was talking to Jimmy D, and the next day I got on the phone with Neil and Jimmy D, and they offered me the job as the Western Canada scout. So I wouldn't be in the business if it wasn't for Bill Dineen and Neil Smith and Jim Devellano, and I'm forever grateful for that. So and then from 1985 for about 4 years, Neil and I worked really, really closely. We were similar age. Spent a lot of nights on the road together, talking hockey, had lots of laughs, greatest years of my life. And I learned a lot from Neil in player evaluation. And driving the car at about 120 miles an hour in a snowstorm between Windsor and Toronto. And I'm just happy that I'm here.
You know, who knew that you and I, 40 years apart, would be linked by Neil Smith?
Yeah.
You at the beginning of the careers and me and him at the end.
That's good. Well, I enjoyed call me anytime, guys. I appreciate you guys do a great job, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Ken. And a reminder that our website is NHLWraparound.com, and also Stanley Cup Date will continue through the week during the course of the conference finals. And our next NHL Wraparound will be our Stanley Cup final preview. Love when we have Ken Holland on. It's, of course, the second time that we've had him on. We had him when he was the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. But the history that the two of you have and the stories that are shared both on and off the camera are quite something.
Oh, well, he has a great sense of humor. He loves to laugh, and we have a very similar sick sense of humor. So, no, it's always fun. Whenever I get together with Ken in real life, it's always fun, but it's always a lot like what you're seeing on the screen. It's just a lot of laughs, and he's really thoughtful in his responses every time he comes on.
Well, your relationship is one that is old, and we have one that is beginning anew, because nice threads you have on today, young man.
Isn't this wonderful? I mean, I love this shirt. I mean, I was given a piece of apparel. I didn't know what it was, and I put it on. And it's like, how? I said to the person who gave it to me, "Where did you get this?" And sure enough, he led me right to the owner of the company. But it looks good on you, too.
It does. And it's hard to make anything look good on me. But Colin Mulvey, the founder of Lugaroo, has managed to do that with his special line of athletic apparel.
It is. It's a sort of a funny name, Loogaroo, Lugaroo. But he told us that the genesis of making the clothing line was after his playing days in professional hockey. He could never find anything that he wanted to wear like during the day and then wear it maybe at night and be run around and not worry about sweating in it and stuff like that. So he wanted stuff for an active lifestyle. He wanted to invent it. And when they launched their brand, their goal was to inspire people to live a life where you were very active. And, you know, that seems to be where they are. They have... Their stuff is really unique because it's stitch free, which when I first read that, I was thinking, stitch free, how could it be stitch free? Well, they have a special way of putting the seams together, which involves no stitching. And so therefore there's no discomfort that you might get from other things. They're always inventing new things, and their website, you should go to it. It's lugaroo.co, not .com, .co, LOOGAROO.co. You'll love this clothing. It is, I'm being very sincere. We're not getting paid to say this. It's great stuff, isn't it?
It is. The shirt itself is so comfortable. It breathes. It feels like you're not wearing anything. And the collars start stiff and they remain stiff no matter how many washings you put it through. So remember, Loogaroo.co, LOOGAROO.co. Let's check out some news from around the NHL and specifically looking at Tuesday's fourth game between the Oilers and the Stars. Injury update. Matthias Ekholm remaining out for the Oilers. Calvin Pickard will back up Stu Skinner. And Victor Arvidsson in. Connor Brown out after having absorbed that hit from Alex Petrovic in Game 3. And for Dallas, Rupe Hintz, game time decision. And for the New Jersey Devils, Thomas Tatar, who is a pending unrestricted free agent, signed a 2-year deal with the Swiss League. He was making $1.8 million on a 1-year deal this past season, 927 NHL games with 6 teams, and 6 times a 20-goal scorer.
You know, I always wanted to ask if Thomas Tatar had a brother named Tuna Tartar.
I knew you had some sort of condiment line in here coming up, so.
Which you didn't relish.
No, I didn't. But something that is going to be relished up in Minnesota, the Frost win their second straight Walter Cup, emblematic of the PWHL title, defeating the Ottawa Charge 2-1 in overtime in Game 4. Every game in that series ended 2-1. Every game in that series ended in overtime. And for the second consecutive year, Liz Sheppers scores the cup-clinching goal for the Frost. This is the human side of the story. May 27th, even though we're not doing this date in history, special day for you because it was the conclusion of one of the great series in NHL history and certainly one of the great games. The double overtime goal by Stéphane Matteau, the second of the series, because he also had one in Game 3. And the emotion that came out in you after that one ended, we covered in our 5-part series that we did on the Rangers' 30th anniversary a year ago. But when you wake up on May 27th, does this date still ring big for you?
You know, not like June 14th. When I wake up on June 14th every year, I get texts from people. I send out texts, and that's the biggest day. I think that Stéphane Matteau himself has tried to patent May 27th, the date. And he's tried to make it a registered trademark for himself. But nonetheless, that day made Steph Matteau's whole life, I tell you. That has followed him around in a very positive way.
I have a story that I'd like to share with you and our listeners because it's one of these unique happenstance things that occurs maybe during the course of life, chance encounters, things of that nature. That game was played on a Friday night, and the Stanley Cup Final did not open until Tuesday. And so after packing my things for what would turn out to be roughly a 2.5-week sojourn back and forth across the continent between New York and Vancouver, made my way down from Bristol to make a quick visit with my folks and have dinner with them at a restaurant in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is the town I was brought up in. And it was a tiny little Italian place. And we sat down, had dinner, and of course, basking in the glow, as Ranger fans, as all of us were, of Game 7, talking about the excitement of the final and potential that the 54-year drought was going to end. And this was a dark restaurant, dim lighting, and off to the side, I noticed a gentleman looking over at us, kind of taking in our conversation. And because of the lighting, couldn't initially make him out. And then after a little bit of time, I finally looked at my folks and I said, "Oh, God, do you know who that is?" And they said, "No, that's Larry Robinson listening in on our conversation." And Robinson, of course, was the longtime Hall of Fame defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens, and then later on played with the LA Kings. But he was also Jacques Lemaire's assistant for the Devils. And because he had taken enough interest in our conversation, I felt I had to go up and introduce myself as having worked for ESPN, but I was a Ranger fan. And I had a little bit of small talk with him and then invited him over to have dessert with my folks. And I wasn't sure if he would say yes or no. He got up, came over, and wouldn't you know it, he spent 45 minutes with us talking about the series, talking about the Devils, talking about the Canadiens, talking about Scotty Bowman. And it was just one of those encounters that you never forget. And 31 years later, that is a story that I just love sharing with people.
It's a great story. It really is a great story. And you think about the date that it was right after this horrible loss that the Devils had taken, and when they thought they were on their way to the Stanley Cup, and to be that generous with his time and his mood, that's a great story, and one that it sort of also reflects on the nature of hockey players, doesn't it? Like they're that kind of people. You take the wins and the losses; they're going to come. You're going to lose. You're going to win. You got to be able to take it that there's Ranger fans sitting across from you. That's just that they're Ranger fans. They're not bad people. They're Ranger fans. So, no, that's a great story, Vic.
But it doesn't end there, because in its way, I was somewhat even pulling for the Devils the next year, just because Robinson had been so gracious with his time, gracious to my parents. And the following June, the Devils were meeting the Detroit Red Wings in the Stanley Cup Final. And before game one, day of game skates taking place, he's sitting up in the stands. He's got a group of reporters around him. And I'm kind of standing off in the distance waiting for the group to disperse. And I approach him and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but a year ago after the Rangers-Devils series, you had sat down and had dessert with me and my folks. He says, oh my God, of course I remember that. Just the other day, I was telling a group of people about that meeting that I had with you and your parents. And so he remembered it. I wished him luck. Fast forward to the end of the series, which was a 4-game sweep by New Jersey. And I went downstairs quickly and quickly saw him heading on his way out, literally 20 minutes after the cup was won. Gave him a quick wave, gave me a thumbs up, and on his way with briefcase in hand. And it was just remarkable that Canadians were so used to winning that this was just another championship for him. So that kind of brings that story just full circle and something I'll always remember.
And the commonality that I have with Larry Robinson, which isn't a close bond, but he played for the Brockville Braves, and I played for the Brockville Braves, albeit in different eras, but he was the most famous Brockville Brave. And so great story about seeing him. And you're right. The Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens, are so used to winning that they take it as just another day at the office.
And that it was. And that will conclude our show for today. Thanks to Ken Holland, the new Vice President, General Manager of the Los Angeles Kings, for joining us. Thanks to UBS Financial Services, Inc. NHL Wraparound and UBS Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. UBS is a sponsor of 3 things you need to pay attention to. No other affiliation, relationship, or endorsement is made, suggested, intended, or should be implied or inferred between UBS and VNS Productions, LLC, or any of the individuals or businesses and or their respective products and services appearing in this program.
Let's say thanks to all of our listeners. Send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com. And if you want to reach one of us individually, I'm Neil at nhlwraparound.com. And of course, there is Vic at nhlwraparound.com. Our podcast can be found on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and our complete catalog of podcasts can be found on our website, nhlwraparound.com. So please subscribe, like us, listen to us, tell your friends to do it. Do whatever you can to get us some more listeners, and look at some of our shorter clips on X, where we are at NHL Wraparound. Stanley Cup date returns Wednesday with daily updates on both conference final series.
You notice my lips never move there. We'll speak to you folks on Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.